During 1991, when Saddam's regime withdrew its forces, the forces stopped at certain areas. A line was drawn. These were the line that the areas north of that line became under the KRG administration, and south of that remained under the control and administration of Baghdad. But since now 2003, with the fall of the regime, we've waited for a legal and constitutional peaceful solution for these disputed territories. These are areas that are in Nineveh Governorate, in Kirkuk, in Diyala. These are areas which have geographically and historically have been part of Kurdistan, but now have become disputed territories. So Article 140 of the Constitution of Iraq, the constitution that was voted for by a majority of the Iraqi people, stipulated the roadmap how to solve it. Before the end of last year, the UN has been engaged in to come forward and offer technical assistance to facilitate the implementation of this article. We are hopeful that with their experience, the UN can help facilitate the implementation of article, which would be in the interest of peace, security, and stability in the region and entire Iraq. As Prime Minister Barzani has stated more than once, the position of the KRG is very clear. It's about justice. It's about property rights. People have been expelled, their rights have been usurped and taken from them forcibly. He stresses that the rights that were taken from us forcibly, we want to return them back peacefully, legally, and in a democratic way. Therefore, we're hopeful that with this process that has started, that issue can be solved.
The current situation is that the southern border of the Kurdistan region is the line drawn by Saddam. And that needs to be emphasized because most pious Western commentators say, why do the Kurds want to expand their region? They forget that Saddam drew the boundaries. The existing boundary is not the result of any constitutional, consultative, or democratic process. The United States, when it removed Saddam's regime, when it negotiated the transitional administrative law, put a block on changes to the internal boundaries of Iraq before the permanent constitution was made. In the permanent constitution, the Kurdish parties won an agreement specified in Article 140 of the constitution that laid out a path for resolving the disputed territories, as they were called, and particularly the province of Kirkuk. If Article 40 was implemented to the letter or in spirit, this would involve having a referendum to resolve the status of Kirkuk governorate or province, based on an electorate which would include the Kurds and Turkmen who had been expelled by Saddam, but exclude the settlers brought in by Saddam after 1968. And the elections would take place in the boundaries of Kirkuk as they were before 1968.
اما فكريكي جواز من زور نية لويك كردا وياك ولا دستوري عراقيات شستيوا بلام رنگا بوچوني جواز من هبه لجوري معاملي كرد لناو كركوكا يعني اما بيمان ويا به همو بيكاتكاني كركوك دنيا بكرينا ولا شناسي خويا واروها لما في وكيكي خويا وبين دستوري هرمي كردستان سرجم فكاني بيكاتكاني غير كردي هرمي كردستان لوانش كركوك زیاتر لەوەی ئێستا بەڕەسمی بناسرێن ئەبێ کەرکوک بێ بە شاری برایەتی ئەو نەتەوانە ئەبێ کەرکوک وەکو پارێزگایەکی ئاسایی هەرێمی کوردستان مامەڵەی لەگەڵا نەکرێ دوای ئەوەی کە ڕیفراندۆم لەو پارێزگایە ئەکرێ و ئەگەر زۆرینە لەگەڵ ئەوە بوو بۆ جۆرەی دەستوری عراقی دیارێکە بێتەوە سەر هەرێمی کوردستان ئەبێت تایبەتمەندیەتێکی هەبێ جۆرێک لە ئۆتۆنۆمی هەبێ و ئەبێ هەموو پێکاتەکانی شارەکە بە جۆرەی قەبارەی خۆیان و لە چوارچێوەی پەیمانێکی مەدەنیە لە ڕاستیە بەشداری لە حکومڕانی شارەکە بکەن بە جۆرێک کە هیچ کەسێ هەست بە تەهمیش و زوڵم و بێبەشی نەکە لە شارەکە.
It's important to realize that the current boundaries of Kirkuk province are not those that they were before the Baathists took power. In effect, Saddam executed what I call a salamander. He hived off Kurdish majority areas from Kirkuk and added on Arab majority areas from other provinces. He also shrank the province as a whole. When people will tell you that the dispute in Kirkuk is all about oil, that's true from the Ba'athist point of view. That's what they were concerned about. They feared that if the Kurds got hold of oil in Kirkuk, they would either use it to become independent or their dependency on Baghdad for financial aid and assistance would be broken. Kurds will tell you, and I think accurately, that they want Kirkuk not just because of its oil, but because they regard it as part of their national territory. If you go back for centuries, it's quite clear that the governorate, if not the city, has always been Kurdish within recent historic times. The city is a mixed city. It has a Turkoman population, loosely related to the Turks of Central Asia, as well as the Turks of Turkey, and an Arab population and a Kurdish population. Kirkuk is the most controversial of the disputed territories. The way to resolve it is fairly straightforward, and it's mapped out in the Constitution. Have a fair referendum within the fair boundaries, and then make sure that the post-referendum arrangements compensate the losers. And the losers can be compensated in two ways. Politically, if they stay, the Kurdistan government has made it plain that there will be power-sharing arrangements in Kirkuk city. And those would involve the protection of the languages of the Turkoman and of the Arabs, and indeed of the Assyrian Christians, who are a small proportion of the relevant city. The second form of compensation is already available and has been taken by some, namely those settlers who came into Kirkuk under Saddam's inducements will be financially compensated for returning to the governorates from whence they came. In a sense, they'll have benefited twice, because they came to Kirkuk with special bonuses from Saddam, and they'll leave with special bonuses. But it's probably the best way of dealing with this kind of tension. So Kirkuk Governorate is the most important of the disputed territories. It lies at the heart of the border between the existing Kurdistan region, the southern part of it, and the northern part of Arab Iraq. It's in the middle. It's astride the second largest oil field in the world. If Kurds have control over it, it doesn't mean that the oil becomes theirs, because under the constitution it's an already exploited oil field. So the link between oil and territory has already been broken at the level of the constitution. If Kirkuk becomes part of Kurdistan, the oil goes to Iraq as a whole. If it does not become part of Kurdistan, the rest of Kurdistan still benefits from Kirkuk's oil on a per capita basis. We have separated the issues of oil from the issues of territory. But if you listen to the world's media, you wouldn't know that that had actually happened. People say the Kurds are going to take the oil, and then, if you're a Turk, they're going to build a Kurdish air force, and then they're going to carve out a greater Kurdistan using their new air force. This is preposterous. Kirkuk's importance in terms of oil is this: if Kirkuk is within Kurdistan, the revenues from the Kirkuk oil field must go to Iraq as a whole. But what it will mean is that no Baghdad government over the next couple of decades will be able to blackmail the Kurds by stopping them having their fair share. Even today, Baghdad governments are late or don't give the full amount of budgetary allocation from oil revenues that the Kurds are entitled to on the basis of their population. So having Kirkuk within Kurdistan would end that kind of fiscal blackmail which has happened in the past. But most importantly, it would enable the people of Kirkuk, who've always wanted to be part, the majority of whom have always wanted to be part of Kurdistan, to have that right.
تەنها منطقەی کەرکوک نییە، زۆر لە ناوچەکانی کە کێشەی لەسەرە، لە جنوبی عێراقش هەیە، لە غەربی عێراقش هەیە، لە کوردستانی عێراقش هەیە. ئەوەی کە پەیوەندی بە هەرێمی کوردستانی عێراقەوەی خانەقینە، مەندەلیە، کەرکووکە و مەخمورە، شێخانە، زەمار و عەنزالەیە، سنجارە. ئەوانە کێشانەیە، ئەو منطقانە کێشانەیە. کاتی خۆی بە بڕیاری جیاجرا خراونەتە سەر ڕژێمی عێراق، هەندێکیان لە کۆنەوە و هەندێکیان دوای پێش ڕوخانی ڕژێم لە پاش شەڕی خەلیجی دووەم ئێمە لە هەم لە قانونی ئیدارەی دەوڵەت و دواییش لە دستوری عێراق مادەیەکمان هەیە بە ناوی مادەی 140 کە خاریتەی ڕێگای دەستنیشان کردووە چۆن کێشەی ئەو ناوچانەی کێشیان لەسەر چارەسەر دەکرێت. ئەو مادەیە 12 میلیۆن عێراقی دەنگی بۆ داوە. خۆ 12 میلیۆنە هەمووی کورد نەبووین، 3 میلیۆنی کورد، 9 میلیۆنی عەرەب بۆ دەنگی بۆ داوە کە کەرکووک مادەیەکە لە مادەی 140 کراوەتەوە و تابعی کوردستانی عێراق و کەرکووک لە کۆنەوە سیاسەتی تعریبی لە دشکراوە. ئەخر ئەگەر کەرکووک شارێکی کوردی نەبوو بۆ هەموو عالەمە لە کەرکووک دەرەکرێت، بۆ عەرەب لە دەرەوە دێنترێتە ناو کەرکووک. ئێستا کە قرار بوو بە پێی خاریتەی ڕێگات تا سیویەکی 12 2007 کێشەی کەرکووک چارەسەر کرد. بەڵام لەبەر وەزعی ناوەخۆ و نەبوونی ئەمن و ئیستیقرار لە ناوەخۆ و تەدەخڵکردنی وڵاتانی دەوروبەت بە تایبەتی تورکیا نەتوانرا مادەی 140 جێبەجێ بکرێ و کەرکووکیش بکەوێتەوە سەر هەرێمی کوردستانی عێراق. بۆیە ئێستا مەسەلەی کەرکووک و مادەی 140 بووەتە مەسەلەیەکی نێودەوڵەتی. نوێنەری تایبەتی سکرتێری گشتی نەتەوەی گرتوەکان لە عێراق ئەوڕۆ بە پێی بڕیاری 1770 ئەنجومەنی ئاسایش سەرپەرشتیاری جێبەجێکردنی مادەی 140. ئێستا مادەی 140 کراوە بۆ سێ تۆپیک، سێ گروپ، ئەوەی کە پەیوەندی بە هەرێمی کوردستانی عێراقەوەیە. گروپی ئاسان، گروپی ناوەڕاست، گروپی زەحمەت. مەخمور و مەندەلی و حەمدانیە و ئاکرێ گروپە ئاسانەکەی. خانەقین و سنجار و ئەوانەی کە پەیوەندیان پێوەبی گروپە ناوەڕاستەکەیە. پارێزگای کەرکووک و شاری کەرکووک گروپە زەحمەتەکەیە. لە مەخمور و ئەوانەوە لە گروپە ئاسانەکەەوە دەستمان پێکرد وەکو تۆپی بەفر لێ دەگەڕێ بڕوا و هەر زیاد دەکە و زیاد دەکە ئەبەو شێوەیە و هەندێک کەرکووک پێویستی بە هەندێک ئیجراعاتی تر هەیە، پێویستی بە هەندێک سیاساتی تر هەیە، پێویستە چارەسەر بکرێت. چونکە مەسەلەی مادەی 140 کەرکووک تەنها مادەیەکی دەستوری قانونی نییە، مادەیەکی سیاسیش. زۆر لە وڵاتانی دەوروبەر و ناوەڕاستە شەوێنی عەرەبیەکان پێیان وایە کورد داوای کەرکووک دەکا لەبەرەوەی نەفتی تێدایە بەوەی نەفت ببێتە قاعیدەیەکی اقتصادی بۆ جیابوونەوە. بەڵام ئێمە ئێستا قانونی نەفت بە جیا لە کەرکووک جێبەجێ دەکەین کە نەفتی عێراقی هەمووانە و بۆ هەمووانە بە کەرکووکیشەوە. ئەو کاتە نەفت بە قانونێکی جیا لە کەرکووک معالەجە کراوە.
Now, the other disputed territories are more complicated. There are a range of them. None of them have as big a population as Kirkuk. Some are relatively easy to settle because they have clear Kurdish majorities. But the problem is there's no easy administrative route because some of these areas were part historically of Arab majority provinces. Some were part of Kurdish majority provinces. Some have had an indeterminate status since 2003. They're part of Arab majority provinces, but the security is provided by the Peshmerga. So, in my view, the UNAMI, the United Nations Assistance Mission in Iraq, has a difficult task, but not altogether problematic task. The easy thing is to identify those districts where there are very clear majorities who want one thing or the other, either to be part of Kurdistan or to be part of Arab Iraq. And then there are a small number of mixed areas where this is not so. And in the mixed ones, the fairest resolution is to allow each area to opt out at a local level. So if a city this size wants to go into Kurdistan by majority vote, the areas on this side which are closer to Arab Iraq should be given the right of opt-out. But there will only be a small number of cases like that. Now, What's the significance of all this? Kurds would not have endorsed the constitution of Iraq if Article 140 had not been part of the constitution. If this article is not implemented in spirit or to the letter, then Kurdistan will regard the constitution as violated. And we'll go back to the world of Iraq before the Baathists. And the world of Iraq before the Baathists was one in which the Kurds were battling for autonomy and the full size of Kurdistan within Iraq, with Baghdad governments which periodically made promises, which they then broke. So this is a vista which needs to be prevented. At the moment, the civil war in Arab Iraq is almost at an end. The best scenario is one in which we see the disputed territories successfully resolved and then Iraq fully stabilizes. The worst scenario is one in which there's renewed fighting between Arab forces and Kurdish forces over the disputed territories. At all costs, American and European diplomacy should be addressed to preventing that possibility.
Well, there was a lot of sign that this question will be a very important and possibly very dangerous question as well. Kirkuk is an important city for the Kurds because it's an historical Kurdish city and the Kurds have a fair claim to take it back or include in their regions because the population lives there. They don't want to live under control of another administration that they have suffered from. It's a very good also indication of the people what happens if you do not address the IDP's issue in a correct way. There are a lot of interesting things happening these days. A lot of things that were in Kurds happening these days, basically, because the referendum is not there yet, and people. The people in Kurdish region are not very happy with that one and not very comfortable. There are some criticism to the Kurdistan regional governments for not doing enough or for not securing the situation. It's a very also the other outside influence, for example, Syria and Turkey's influence on not changing the structure of the city and keeping it there by using other groups. Syria claiming the Arab, supporting the Arabs, while Turkey is claiming they are supporting the minority groups, Turkomans there. It's going to be a very dangerous, and I think as international society has to be fair and take a good control, working with the Kurdish administration and Iraqi central government to find a solution to the issue.
خلق كردستان تصاورش كركوك بقرأت وسر هرمي كردستان لبروي كركوك وكوباسم كرد خاچی كردستان وأما حزدا كين مشكلة كركوك بحوار صار سر بكري ولبرويني كركوك نفتي ليت وكأستا نفد للزور شويني تري كردستان كشف بوا أما نفت ما نقلق زورا غير مثلا نفد بي ساماني سروشي بلام موضوعك خاكا بيمان وايا بقرانوي كركوك مشكلة زور قولة العراق صار سر دبي وكركوك شارشي بيكوجيانا مدينة تأخية وبقرانوي كركوك خلشي كركوش قازان زكا فرمو تماشاي هولير وسليماني دهوكا ببراو لقر كركوك كاولا هيت كس خزمتي كركوشي نكرد بقرانوي كركوك كرد وتركمان وعرب وهم أواني لوين دلن قازان زكا بنا قرانوي كركوك مشكلة زور قولة دروز دبي لبروي أما أوي دمانوي دستورها كلا دستور داهية مادة 130 لبو تسال سركردني كركوك بو بيمان وايا بزي كردني دستور مشاكل العراق كم دبيتوها.
It's pretty tense, and we've just seen a standoff in Kamakin, which is a predominantly Kurdish town in Diyala province, just south of the Kurdistan region as it stands, and the standoff between the Peshmerga and the Iraqi military that seems now to have been resolved, but it's symptomatic of a wider set of problems regarding the disputed territories that includes Sinjar, Mahmoud, Baladruz, but of course the key one there is Kirkuk. Will this get resolved? Well, it's a very difficult situation right now. The disputed territories are highly symbolic, not only for the Kurds but also for Arabs, for Turkmens, for Iraqi nationalists. who still struggle to accept that the Kurdistan region is legitimate and that it's institutionalized reality of Iraq. There has been a UN attempt to resolve the status of some of the disputed territories in Accra, Panakin, Baladruz, Hamdaniya, which was rejected by everybody. There's going to be a further UN attempt to resolve the status of Kirkuk over the next few months, and we have to wait and see what happens there. But this is a very difficult set of problems that goes right to the core of what the future of Iraq will be like and what it will mean to be an Iraqi in that state. For the Kurds, it's essential that the Kurdistan region has a clear boundary, that regions that they see as predominantly Kurdish are within the Kurdistan region, and especially Kirkuk. For the Arab partners in the Iraqi government, this is, in effect, weakens the Iraqi state. The bulwark of Arab nationalism in the Middle East is being weakened. So it's a highly difficult set of problems that we face here. Will it get resolved? Well, we hope that for this to be resolved, everybody has to be disappointed with this. There can be no zero-sum options. There can only be compromise if there is recognition of, on the one hand, the rights of communities in Kirkuk other than the Kurds, but on the other, the preeminence of the Kurdish position in Kirkuk in terms of the numbers of people there, the history of the city, and a compromise is going to be very difficult to reach, as everybody seems to be drawing red lines beyond which they will not go.
Yes, I think the Turkish state had a tradition of trying to intervene in what's going on in Kirkuk by supporting the Turkmen there. That all the Turkmen there, and often the numbers were exaggerated, were very much homogeneous, unified, and ready to walk to the tune of Turkey. But the elections that took place, I think in late 2005 it was, came as a surprise to the Turkish political establishment. It came as a surprise because not only the media reported the way in which there were Turkmen candidates being elected on Kurdish tickets or other tickets, party tickets, but that the preferred political party did not receive much of a support in those elections. Now, I think that helped the questioning of some of the assumptions in the Turkish political circles, which was very healthy, because it led to the recognition that things are not as simple as they were made out to be, and the fact that they are not that simple may complicate things with dire consequences for Turkey itself too.
It is often said that the Kurds only want Kirkuk because of the oil there, and the only reason why Saddam was ever interested in Kirkuk was because of the oil. If you look at when oil grabs have actually happened on Kirkuk, you find that there have been 2 oil grabs in the history of Iraq. Neither of them were done by the Kurds. The first was done by the British. The second was done by Saddam in the 1970s as he Arabized Kirkuk. The Kurds, in effect, gave away their rights to have Kirkuk's oil in the constitution. So formally within the constitution of Iraq, all oil revenue will be centralized into the Iraqi government and then redistributed according to population size per governorate. So whether the oil is coming from Kirkuk or from Rumaila or from the new fields in Kurdistan, the oil revenue belongs to Iraq. So in that regard, this, from a Kurdish perspective, it's not really about oil. Also, if you start to look at the size of some of the oil deposits actually inside the Kurdistan region itself, then okay, these things are not super giant fields like the Kirkuk field, but they're quite significant. So if the Kurds were really bothered about oil, then they have the oil, what they need already. The problem with Kirkuk is much more symbolic. It's much more to do with notions of nationalism, of historic suffering, of the place of that city in the history of Iraq, and the fact that there are 3 communities that are contesting its future, and not 2. And that adds a further layer to the complexity of the problem there.
The Sunni Arabs do not want Kirkuk to become part of Kurdistan under any circumstances. Those who are present in the federal parliament. It's not the same as people on the ground, but they're elected representatives. And there's a battle among the Shia Arabs. Some Shia Arabs are federalists, and they are committed to their political alliance with Kurdistan, and they'd like to see this go ahead. Others are, by contrast, centralists, notably the Sadrists. So Article 140, in my view, has been postponed. It's been postponed because of internal tensions among the Arab parties, but it's also been postponed because America appeased Arab and Turkish sentiment on the question and didn't push it. The Americans were fearful that the Turks might invade over the issue of Kirkuk, and particularly the interests of the Turkmen. They've also, in many cases, American officials are Arabist by background and tend to believe what the Arabs say about the Kurds, so the Kurds are planning on independence, so that they don't want them to have Kirkuk to inhibit the possibility of independence occurring. So I think it's been a combination of those forces and also remarkable patience on the part of the Kurds. That's what will run out. Kurdish political parties have seen 5 years since 2003 in which the status of Kirkuk and the other disputed territories has not been resolved. I don't think we could expect another 5 years to go by without Kurdish people on the ground seeking to resolve matters themselves. I think we have no more than 6 months to resolve these questions, because I think that in the early part of 2009 there will be a substantial American withdrawal from Iraq, whoever becomes the next president. So it's vital in this intervening moment that Article 140 be resolved.
If Kirkuk were to be incorporated into the Kurdish administration or federated state, this would be unacceptable, and that severe consequences could flow from it. I think the Turkish position on this has mellowed, if you wish, on this issue. But what is interesting here, and in terms of maybe conflict resolution, there might be a lot of lessons to be learned, is that mellowing has taken shape on all sides. Not only on the Kurdish side, the Turkish side as well, or on Iraqi side, on the United States side. It's almost like critical players are converging on a more common sense position, and politicians in northern Iraq as well as here and maybe in Baghdad are more and more preferring to leave this issue to time. The notion that time is kind, and rather than rigidly apply what should be applied in the context of the Iraqi constitution, it might be wiser to leave this to time and then see if an understanding or a solution that is reasonably acceptable to the parties may emerge. And I think in this exercise there seems to be also an unacknowledged recognition of continuing to build up the dialogue, and with the dialogue building up trust, mutual reciprocal trust, which may contribute to finding a more acceptable let's say, modus vivendi for Kirkuk. That's how I'm observing this. Will this occur? It's another matter. And what form will this take place is also another matter. I think this is an evolving situation, and I am sensing that interested parties are choosing to leave this as an evolving situation in the hope that it will help sides, or at least it will prevent the issue from becoming aggravated. And in the meantime, with trust, dialogue, interdependence, a more acceptable modus vivendi might be found. And I think there are a lot of reports that address these issues, and in the media I read all kinds of different scenarios being talked about. Which one of them would prevail is another question.
The Iraqi central government has to obey its promises that Article 140 and under the international control, maybe the supervision, they have to do the referendum to see what the people in that city are thinking about, where they want to live or who they want to be part of it. And that's a very crucial question, and it may lead to a very bloody war if it's not addressed in a way that people are happy. And I can see a lot of pressures on Kurdistan regional government right now in order to put their weight behind that one. Iraqi central government trying to do certain things that reminds Kurds bad days, Saddam days. They're trying to cut the revenues they're getting from the central government. They're trying to take the control of this certain places, little towns that are occupied by the Kurds, because it's in the border. They are claiming that this has to be in the central government. They're trying to limit the decision-making power of the Kurdish administration. These are very strong. These are very important things, and I don't think Kurds wants to get into any other trouble with the Iraqi forces. But I can hear from people, they start talking about if that's is going to happen like that, we know how to defend ourselves, which comes into mind that they are going to use probably defensive positions with their security forces, Peshmergas, to stop what is happening in the region. Nobody wants to see that one. Iraq is already in mass, and the Kurdish region is enjoying to a certain extent security and development in the region. None of the Kurds wants it. I don't think Kurdish administration wants it or Peshmerga forces wants it. But I think it's just if the UN and probably the big powers in the region are not address the issues in a correct way, legalized way, accepted way, and promised way, there will be a big troubles coming.
Article 140 of the Constitution called for its solution before the end of 2007. But unfortunately, there were some delays at the beginning, lack of seriousness, lack of proper mechanism, lack of cooperation. These were all reasons that created the delay. But after Prime Minister Maliki's government took office, we have not seen any negative political position vis-a-vis the implementation of this article. Therefore, we're optimistic that this issue can be solved. It's true that it has been delayed, but it is also a complicated issue. This kind of change, or these demographic change, or these detachments from Kurdistan region has happened a long time ago. So the process started a long time ago. We have to be realistic that such kind of complicated issues need proper time, and the Kurdish leadership has been flexible and has been patient and has been giving that time so that we can have a long-lasting solution, a solution that brings peace afterwards. I believe all the main political parties in Iraq and the Iraqi federal government, the parliament, they've all committed themselves to this constitutional article. Nobody can run away from its commitment, and this is a constitutional commitment, as Prime Minister Maliki has said and stated more than once, that this is a constitutional commitment, it has to be met. Let's hope for that, and we hope that the new Iraq has to show that it's better than the old Iraq.
So what happens if they don't resolve this via the mechanisms of the Constitution? If there's no UN agreement come October, November, the chances are that the Kurds will invoke articles of the Constitution that allow the Kirkuk Provincial Council to seek a merger with the Kurdistan region by referendum, which they would be legally, within the terms of the Constitution, mandate allowed to do. Would that be accepted by their partners in Iraq? Probably not. I would say you could very quickly see a Kurdish-Arab standoff, which could be it's very difficult to see how that would then develop. So I think the problem of the disputed territories, especially of Kirkuk, but also of the other territories, including Sinjar and Kanakin, are crucial not only for the understanding the future of the Kurds, but understanding the future of Iraq as a whole. If they don't resolve the disputed territories through compromise and consensus, then the actual state of Iraq itself could unravel.